Security, get this black woman out of my sight. She's contaminating the air I breathe. Sloane Whitfield, the billionaire's mistress, didn't even look at Brianna when she said it. She just snapped her fingers like summoning a servant to take out trash. Brianna Underwood Montgomery stood frozen, 7 months pregnant, wearing a $15,000 gown, at a charity gala hosted under her own husband's name. "Sloane, please. I'm Richard's wife. I organized this." "Wife?" the mistress laughed. "Honey, you're not a wife. You're a diversity project that expired." 200 guests watched. Not one spoke. None of them knew that this was only the opening act. Because before the Montgomerys finished celebrating their little victory, a $50 million private jet would land on their private runway in the Hamptons. And the billionaire's pregnant black wife they had just watched be humiliated? Her 3 brothers would step out, and they weren't there to beg. 6 hours before that, satisfies. Moment in the ballroom, Brianna Underwood Montgomery was exactly where she belonged. Not at a fancy gala surrounded by people who despised her, but in a delivery room at Lenox Hill Hospital, holding the hand of a terrified first-time mother. "You're almost there," Brianna whispered, her voice steady and warm. "One more push. Your daughter wants to meet you." The baby arrived at 4:47 p.m., screaming, healthy, a miracle wrapped in 7 pounds of new life. The mother grabbed Brianna's hand, tears streaming down her exhausted face. "Thank you. You're the only nurse who made me feel like a person instead of a number." Brianna smiled and squeezed her hand gently. Everyone deserves to feel that way, especially on the most important day of their life. 862 babies. That's how many Brianna had helped bring into this world during her career. Harvard-educated, founder of a literacy program that had taught over 10,000 children to read. She had built something meaningful with her own hands, her own heart. But tonight, none of that would matter to the people waiting at the Montgomery Foundation Gala. To them, she would always be one thing: the black woman who had somehow tricked a billionaire into marriage. Her husband, Richard Montgomery III, was Manhattan royalty, Forbes 400, net worth of $3.2 billion, CEO of Montgomery Development Group, with glittering properties from Park Avenue to Dubai Marina. Old money married to new ambition. They had met at a charity auction 4 years ago. He pursued her relentlessly for 6 months before she finally agreed to coffee. Just coffee, she had insisted. But coffee became dinner. Dinner became weekends in the Hamptons. And 18 months later, they married in an $8 million ceremony in Tuscany. For 3 years, Brianna believed she had found her fairy tale. She was catastrophically wrong. Sloane Whitfield had entered their lives 18 months ago. Blonde, beautiful, 29 years old. Officially, she was Richard's senior communications advisor. Unofficially, she was in his bed before their first business trip ended. Brianna noticed the signs, the late-night texts he hid, the business trips that didn't add up, the perfume on his collar that wasn't hers. But she stayed. For the baby growing inside her. For the family she desperately wanted to create. As she rushed home to change for the gala, her phone buzzed with an anonymous text. "Don't go tonight. They're planning something." She should have listened. The Monarch Grand Ballroom looked like something from a fairy tale written by accountants. Crystal chandeliers scattered light across 200 of Manhattan's wealthiest faces. Champagne towers sparkled. Laughter tinkled like wind chimes made of money. Brianna arrived at 7:23 p.m., slightly breathless from rushing. Her emerald gown, chosen because Richard once said green made her glow, hugged her pregnant belly beautifully. She had spent an hour on her makeup, wanting to look perfect for the literacy program she had built from nothing. The moment she crossed the threshold, she felt it. The shift in the air pressure. The way conversations died mid-sentence as she passed. The sidelong glances that lingered a beat too long. And there, standing at the center of the room like she owned every square inch of it, was Sloane Whitfield, right next to Richard, wearing a dress almost identical to Brianna's, except Sloane's dress was white. Brianna approached the first familiar face she saw, Margaret Wells, a philanthropist who had donated $200,000 specifically because of Brianna's literacy initiative. "Margaret, it's wonderful to see you again. Thank you so much for your continued support of—" Sloane materialized between them like a designer-clad ghost. "Mrs. Wells, Mrs. How absolutely wonderful that you could join us tonight. I'm Sloane Whitfield, Richard's partner in this meaningful work." Partner. The word dripped with double meaning. "I'm actually his wife," Brianna said, keeping her voice steady. "And I founded the literacy program that—" "Of course you are, sweetheart." Sloane's smile never flickered. "Legally speaking, anyway, but we both know who really manages Richard's life these days, don't we?" Margaret Wells looked deeply uncomfortable. She muttered something about finding her seat and hurried away without another word. This scene repeated itself 4 more times. Every donor Brianna tried to thank, Sloane intercepted. Every conversation Brianna attempted, Sloane torpedoed with a smile and a subtle knife. It was choreographed, deliberate, a masterclass in social destruction disguised as politeness. During one of these ambushes, Sloane glanced at Brianna's wrist and let out a performative gasp. "Oh my goodness, what a darling little bracelet! Did Target have a sale?" A woman nearby leaned toward her husband and whispered, "That's actually a limited edition Cartier love bracelet. It costs around $80,000. Brianna heard every word. She didn't bother correcting Sloane. What would be the point? People like Sloane didn't care about truth. They cared about winning. And right now, Sloane was winning. The seating chart was where the cruelty became concrete. Brianna walked to the head table, the table she had personally arranged 3 weeks earlier, placing each name card with care. Her nameplate was gone. In its place sat a woman she had never seen before, laughing at something Richard's business partner had said. "Excuse me," Brianna said politely. "I believe there's been a mistake. This is my assigned seat." Sloane appeared instantly, as if she had been waiting for this exact moment. "Actually, this table is reserved for people who make meaningful contributions to the foundation." Her voice carried across the nearby tables, ensuring maximum audience. "Perhaps you'd be more comfortable near the kitchen. I'm sure that environment would feel more familiar to you." The implication was unmistakable. Several guests shifted in their seats. A few exchanged uncomfortable glances. None of them spoke up. 2 security guards approached with rehearsed concern. "Ma'am, we need you to step aside while we verify your invitation to this event." "Verify my—" Brianna's voice caught in her throat. "I'm Brianna Montgomery, Richard's wife. I organized this entire gala. My name is on the invitation." The guard's expression remained professionally blank. "Ma'am, please step aside. We're just following protocol." Brianna looked across the ballroom at Richard. He was watching. He had seen everything unfold. Their eyes met across the glittering crowd. "Richard." Her voice cracked despite her best efforts. "Richard, please say something." For a moment, something flickered in his expression. Guilt? Shame? The remnants of whatever he had once felt for her? Then it vanished. "Sloane is managing logistics tonight," he said flatly. "Let's not create a scene, Brianna. We can discuss this at home." Discuss this at home. His pregnant wife was being publicly stripped of her dignity, and his concern was avoiding a scene. The guards escorted Brianna to a small table near the kitchen entrance. The chairs around her remained empty all evening. Nobody wanted to be seen sitting with the woman the billionaire's mistress had marked for exile. But the cruelest cut was still coming. Across the room, Brianna spotted a face that made her heart lift momentarily. Denise, her best friend for 15 years. The woman who had held her through her father's funeral. The woman who knew every secret, every fear, every hope. Denise was sitting at Sloane's table, laughing at something Sloane had said. Brianna's heart didn't break. It shattered. She walked over slowly, each step heavier than the last, hoping desperately for some explanation. "Denise, what are you doing sitting with her?" Denise wouldn't meet her eyes. Her fingers twisted her napkin into knots. "Bree, She offered to fund my nonprofit, $300,000. I have 12 employees counting on me. I couldn't say no." "You know what she's doing to my marriage, to my life." Silence. That terrible, cowardly silence that says everything. "I'm sorry," Denise whispered. But she didn't move. She didn't stand up. She stayed exactly where she was, at the table of the woman destroying her best friend's world. Brianna returned to her exile by the kitchen. She placed both hands on her belly, feeling her baby kick against her palms. "At least you're still with me," she thought. "At least I'm not completely alone." The auction began at 9 p.m. sharp. Sloane took the stage like a conquering queen, her white dress flowing behind her, her smile bright enough to blind. "Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining us for this magnificent evening." Her voice was honey laced with arsenic. "I want to take a moment to recognize the extraordinary people who made tonight possible." She named 6 people: board members, corporate sponsors, Richard's golf buddies. She described their contributions in glowing detail. She did not mention Brianna, not once, not even in passing. 3 years. Brianna had spent 3 years building the literacy program from scratch. She had written every grant proposal. She had recruited every major donor in this room. She had personally visited 43 schools to implement the curriculum, and now she was being erased from her own creation. Something shifted inside Brianna. The fear that had kept her quiet all night began transforming into something harder, something that refused to be invisible. She stood up. The room seemed to hold its breath as she walked toward the stage. Her heels clicked against the marble floor like a countdown. Each step was a declaration. Sloane saw her coming. Her smile flickered for just a heartbeat before snapping back into place. "Security, it appears we have an uninvited guest approaching the stage." Brianna kept walking. "I'm not a guest. I'm his wife. And this is my program." The guards hesitated, looking between Sloane and Richard. Richard was suddenly fascinated by his champagne glass. Sloane descended from the stage, her white dress flowing like a battle flag. She stopped directly in front of Brianna, close enough that her perfume was overwhelming. "You're embarrassing yourself," Sloane hissed. "You're embarrassing him. You think because you married money you belong in rooms like this?" She gestured at the chandeliers, the champagne towers, the designer gowns. "You don't. You never did. You're just a little black girl from Newark who got lucky for a while, and luck always runs out." Brianna's voice was steel wrapped in silk. "I'm not leaving." "Yes, you are." What happened next would be broadcast on every major news network within 24 hours. Sloane placed her hand on her own stomach, the same protective gesture Brianna made 100 times a day. "You need to leave," Sloane announced, loud enough for the nearby tables to hear every word. "Because I'm carrying something you could never give him. A real heir. A child with pure Montgomery blood. Not some—" She didn't finish the sentence. The silence finished it for her. Brianna felt the words like physical blows. Her vision blurred. Her hands moved instinctively to protect her belly. "Richard," she whispered, one last desperate plea to the man she had married. Richard Montgomery, billionaire, Forbes 400, master of his universe, looked at his pregnant wife. The woman he had pursued for months. The woman he had married in Tuscany. The woman carrying his child. He looked directly at her, and he said absolutely nothing. That silence was the match that lit the fire. Sloane shoved Brianna with both hands. Hard. Brianna stumbled backward, her heel catching on the hem of her gown. Then Sloane's designer stiletto connected with Brianna's pregnant belly. The kick wasn't accidental, it wasn't a stumble. It was deliberate, aimed, and vicious. Brianna fell. Her dress tore. Her hands clutched her stomach as she hit the cold marble floor. 200 people witnessed every second. 200 phones recorded every frame. 200 voices could have screamed, could have intervened, could have done something. Anything. The silence was deafening. A waiter near the kitchen dropped his tray. The crash of shattering glass was the only sound in the entire ballroom. Brianna lay on the floor, her body curled protectively around her unborn child. The baby moved inside her. A small kick, as if to say, "I'm still here, Mama." Richard finally moved. He walked toward his wife. For one desperate moment, Brianna thought he might help her up, might finally choose her, might finally be the man she had believed him to be. "Brianna," he said, his voice flat as a frozen lake, "just go home. We'll talk about this later." Later. His pregnant wife had just been kicked in the stomach, and he wanted to discuss it later. Two servers rushed forward to help Brianna to her feet. A busboy retrieved her purse. These minimum-wage workers showed more basic humanity than every millionaire in that room combined. As Brianna walked toward the exit, a young staff member, a black woman barely out of college, whispered to her co-worker, "Oh my God, does she have any idea who that woman actually is?" "Who?" The young woman shook her head quickly, eyes wide. "Never mind. Forget I said anything." Brianna heard. She filed it away. Outside, the night air hit her like cold water. She leaned against a marble column, her breath coming in ragged gasps, her hands trembling against her belly. Footsteps approached. Brianna tensed, preparing for another attack. But the woman who appeared wasn't Sloane. She was tall, black, with natural hair and eyes that had witnessed too much injustice to be surprised by any of it. Her badge read, Detective Iris Coleman, NYPD. "Ma'am, are you all right? I saw what happened in there." Brianna looked at her. "You saw. Did you say anything?" Iris's expression tightened with shame. "I was here as a guest. I didn't want to cause a scene. That's not an excuse. I'm sorry." "No," Brianna agreed quietly. "It's not. Please let me take you to a hospital. You need to make sure your baby is safe." Brianna nodded slowly. For the first time all night, someone was treating her like a human being who mattered. As they walked to the car, Brianna took one last look at the glowing windows of the Monarch Grand Ballroom. Inside, the party continued. Champagne still flowed, laughter still echoed, as if nothing had happened. But something had happened. And soon, everyone in that room would understand exactly how much. Lenox Hill Hospital at midnight felt like a different planet from the ballroom Brianna had just fled. Harsh fluorescent lights replaced crystal chandeliers. The smell of antiseptic replaced expensive perfume. The beeping of monitors replaced chamber music. Dr. Patricia Okonkwo, a Nigerian-American obstetrician who had known Brianna for years, performed the ultrasound personally. "Baby's heartbeat is strong," she announced finally. "I'm seeing elevated stress hormones but no physical trauma to the fetus. You're incredibly lucky, Brianna." Lucky. The word felt like a cruel joke. "But you need complete rest," Dr. Okonkwo continued, her voice serious. "No stress, no confrontation. Any additional trauma could trigger early labor. Do you understand?" Brianna nodded mechanically, but her mind was racing. Where would she go? What would she do? Her entire life had just collapsed like a house of cards in a hurricane. The answer arrived 90 minutes later. Richard Montgomery walked into her hospital room like he owned the building, which, considering his family's donation history, he essentially did. He didn't ask how she was feeling. He didn't ask about the baby. He dropped a manila folder on her bed. "Sign these." Brianna opened the folder. Her blood turned to ice. Annulment papers. Not divorce. Annulment. A legal declaration that their marriage had never truly existed. $500,000, Richard said, as if he were negotiating a real estate deal. That's extremely generous, all things considered. All things considered? Brianna's voice rose. I'm 7 months pregnant with your child. We've been married for 3 years. I was just assaulted by your mistress in front of 200 witnesses, and you're offering me $500,000 to disappear. Richard's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. It's not about the baby. It's about protecting my family's reputation. My mother has made her expectations very clear. Your mother? Something flickered across his face. Guilt, fear, or both, before his mask slipped back into place. Just sign the papers, Brianna. It's better for everyone. Better for everyone, or better for you? He didn't answer. He turned and walked out without another word. Brianna stared at the annulment papers until the legal jargon blurred into meaningless shapes. She refused to cry. She refused to give them that satisfaction. The next morning revealed exactly how thoroughly her destruction had been planned. Her credit cards were declined at the hospital gift shop. When she called the bank, a sympathetic representative delivered devastating news. I'm sorry, Mrs. Montgomery. Your name has been removed from all joint accounts as of 6 a.m. this morning. Removed by whom? I'm not authorized to disclose that information. She tried to log into the Montgomery Foundation's administrative system, the organization she had built from nothing. Access denied. Her credentials had been revoked overnight. Her phone buzzed with a news alert. The headline made her stomach lurch. Montgomery heir ends marriage to unstable nurse. Sources reveal erratic behavior. Mistress Sloan Whitfield named new foundation director. The article quoted anonymous sources close to the family, who described Brianna as emotionally volatile, prone to jealous delusions, and fundamentally unsuited for high society. 3 years of building something meaningful. 10,000 children taught to read. 862 babies delivered safely into the world, reduced to tabloid lies. Her phone rang. Mama. Baby, I saw the news online. Please tell me none of it is true. It's not true, Mama. Not a single word. Her mother's voice cracked with helpless frustration. I know, sweetheart, I believe you. But who else is going to believe us? We're nobody to people like them. We're nothing. That word, nothing, cut deeper than anything Sloan had said. Brianna sat alone in her hospital room, watching rain stream down the window like tears. $84 in her personal checking account. 7 months pregnant. No home to return to. No friends she could trust. No family who could help. She picked up her phone and scrolled to contacts she hadn't called in 4 years. Malcolm, Desmond, Isaac, her brothers, the men who had sacrificed everything to put her through Harvard. The men she had deliberately kept at arm's length after marrying Richard because she wanted to build her own life, prove she didn't need anyone's help. Pride. Stupid, stubborn, costly pride. She dialed Malcolm. It rang 4 times before connecting. Underwood Global Logistics, Mr. Underwood's office. How may I direct your call? This is Brianna Underwood. I need to speak with my brother immediately. A pause. I apologize, Ms. Underwood. Mr. Underwood is in emergency meetings and absolutely cannot be disturbed. It's extremely urgent. Please. I understand, but that's simply not possible. Underwood Global is facing a $2 billion lawsuit. The entire executive team is in crisis management mode. Brianna's heart sank into her stomach. She tried Desmond's number, voicemail. She tried Isaac's number, disconnected. The universe was sending her a message, and the message was brutal. You wanted independence. Now you have it. She turned on the television, desperate for any distraction. The news only made things worse. Underwood Global Logistics faces catastrophic lawsuit. Industry analysts predict possible collapse of shipping empire. Even her family was falling apart. Even the people she thought she could run to as a last resort were drowning in their own disasters. Brianna placed both hands on her belly. "It's just you and me now, little one. Just you and me." The knock came at 3:17 p.m. Gloria Montgomery, Richard's mother, matriarch of the Montgomery dynasty, queen of Manhattan society, swept into the hospital room like visiting royalty, inspecting a servant's quarters. She wore Chanel, she carried roses, she smiled like a predator who had already eaten. "Brianna, darling, I'm so terribly sorry about this awful misunderstanding." Brianna pushed herself upright slowly. "Mrs. Montgomery, I didn't expect to see you here. Please, call me Gloria. We're family, after all." The word family sounded obscene in her mouth. After everything that's happened, formality seems so unnecessary. She perched on the edge of the bed and took Brianna's hand. Her grip was ice cold. "I want to help you, dear. Truly I do. But first you need to understand something important about our family." "Understand what?" Gloria's smile remained fixed, but her eyes transformed into something ancient and cruel. "I hired Sloane Whitfield 3 years ago, the very moment I learned Richard was serious about marrying you." The words hit Brianna like a second kick to the stomach. "You... what?" "You were never supposed to become part of this family. I assumed Richard would come to his senses eventually, but the foolish boy actually fell in love with you. Genuinely. That wasn't part of my plan." "Your plan?" "Sloane was supposed to be a temporary distraction, a pretty little affair to dissolve your marriage quietly. But she became ambitious. The pregnancy was entirely her idea, not mine." Brianna pulled her hand away like she'd touched something diseased. "You orchestrated everything, the affair, the humiliation, tonight. All of it. I protected my family, my bloodline, my legacy. Because I'm black, as..." Gloria didn't flinch. She didn't look away. She didn't even bother denying it. "Because you don't belong. Because your children would dilute a bloodline that has remained pure for 7 generations. Because every time I saw you at a Montgomery function, I saw everything my ancestors built being contaminated by your presence." The mask was completely off now. The gracious society matron had revealed the monster beneath. "So here's what happens next," Gloria continued briskly. "You sign those annulment papers, you take the money, you disappear permanently. And in exchange, I won't destroy what little remains of your pathetic life. And if I refuse?" Gloria stood, smoothing invisible wrinkles from her Chanel suit. "Then I will ensure your child never knows a moment's peace. Not in any school, not in any neighborhood, not in any career. The Montgomery influence extends further than you can possibly imagine." She walked to the door, then paused with her hand on the frame. "You have 24 hours, dear. I suggest you use them wisely." The door clicked shut behind her. Brianna sat in the suffocating silence, her body trembling uncontrollably. Then her phone rang. Unknown number. She answered with shaking hands. "Bree, it's Malcolm. Don't say anything, just listen carefully." Her brother's voice was calm, controlled, exactly as she remembered. "The lawsuit is fake. We created it ourselves. We needed Montgomery and his people to believe we were vulnerable and distracted." "Malcolm, what are you—" "We've known about Gloria's campaign against you for 6 months. We've known about Sloane for 2 years. We've been waiting patiently for them to make their move." Brianna's breath caught in her throat. "You knew? This entire time?" "Tomorrow Richard is hosting something called a victory brunch at his Hamptons estate. I need you to attend. Let them believe they've won completely. And then what? Then you watch us take absolutely everything from them." Outside her window, a black SUV pulled into the hospital parking lot. The driver looked up at her room and nodded once. For the first time in 48 hours, Brianna smiled. Montgomery Estate sprawled across 52 acres of Hampton's oceanfront like a monument to generational wealth and inherited arrogance. Tennis courts, Olympic swimming pools, a hedge maze that cost more to maintain than most families earned in a decade. And most importantly, for today's events, a private runway capable of landing full-sized jets. Richard had never mentioned the runway during their marriage, just another secret in a relationship built entirely on them. The victory brunch, they actually called it that without a trace of irony, occupied the main terrace overlooking the Atlantic. 150 guests, silver service that had been in the Montgomery family for 4 generations, champagne that cost more per bottle than most Americans earned in a week. At the center of it all, glowing like a triumphant angel in pristine white, sat Sloane Whitfield. "The Montgomery Foundation enters an exciting new era today," she announced, her voice carrying across the manicured lawn. "An era of fresh perspectives, bold leadership, and wonderful announcements." She paused for maximum dramatic effect. "I'm absolutely thrilled to share that Richard and I are expecting our first child together." The applause was immediate and enthusiastic. Gloria Montgomery, seated at the head table, dabbed at her eyes with a monogrammed handkerchief, performing the role of overjoyed grandmother-to-be. Brianna watched from the edge of the terrace. She had arrived without announcement, exactly as Malcolm had instructed. Security guards tracked her movements, but hadn't tried to remove her. Yet. Let them believe they've won completely. Sloane spotted her during the second course. Surprise flickered across her face before settling into satisfied contempt. "Security, it seems we have an uninvited guest attempting to crash our celebration." Brianna didn't flinch. "I'm not here to cause trouble. I'm here to watch." "Watch what, exactly?" Sloane laughed, playing to her audience. "Your own complete irrelevance?" "No." Brianna's voice was perfectly calm, almost serene. "Yours." The words hung in the champagne-scented air. Sloane's smile wavered for just a fraction of a second. Then the sound came. It began as a distant rumble, barely audible over the string quartet. Most guests assumed it was a helicopter from a neighboring estate. The Hamptons were thick with billionaires and their expensive toys. But this sound was different. Deeper. More powerful. The rumble of serious machinery. One by one, heads turned toward the sky. A Gulfstream G700 was descending toward the Montgomery estate. Sleek black fuselage, distinctive swept wings. The tail number gleamed in the morning sunlight. N.U. Wood. Richard stood up so abruptly he knocked over his champagne flute. "What the hell is that?" An aide rushed over, face drained of color. "Sir, that aircraft is requesting permission to land on your private runway." "I didn't authorize any landing today." "They're not requesting permission, sir. They're informing us they're landing. Now." The Gulfstream touched down with surgical precision, engines screaming as it decelerated along the private runway. It taxied to a complete stop, the engines winding down to a whisper. For a long, breathless moment, nothing happened. The door remained sealed. The guests held their collective breath. Then the door swung open. The stairs descended automatically. 3 men emerged. First came Malcolm Underwood, 38 years old, CEO of Underwood Global Logistics, personal net worth of $12 billion. He wore a Brioni suit that cost more than Richard's favorite car and moved with the unhurried confidence of a man who had never lost at anything important. Second came Desmond Underwood, 35, founding partner of Underwood Capital, $8 billion under management. He was finishing a phone call as he descended the stairs. "Yes, initiate the freeze on all Montgomery-connected accounts, effective immediately, no exceptions." Last came Isaac Underwood, 33, civil rights attorney, senior counsel at the ACLU, 6 Supreme Court victories on his resume. He carried a leather briefcase that Richard would soon learn contained 15 years of meticulously documented Montgomery family secrets. A black Rolls-Royce Phantom materialized at the bottom of the stairs. The brothers climbed in without acknowledging the gaping crowd. The car drove directly toward the terrace. Malcolm stepped out first. He walked through this parting crowd like a knife through silk, his eyes fixed on one target: Richard Montgomery. "Mr. Montgomery." Malcolm's voice carried across the stunned silence of the terrace. "We haven't formally met, but I've known everything about you for 5 years now." Richard's face had turned the color of old newspaper. Who are you?" "Malcolm Underwood. These are my brothers, Desmond and Isaac." He paused, letting the name register. "And that woman you've spent 3 years trying to destroy? Brianna Underwood Montgomery? She's our little sister." The collective gasp from the crowd was audible across the entire estate. "The $2 billion lawsuit?" Malcolm continued, his voice conversational, almost pleasant. "Completely fabricated. We planted it ourselves. We needed you and your people to believe Underwood Global was vulnerable and distracted." Richard's mouth opened and closed uselessly. That's market manipulation. That's securities fraud. That's illegal." "Actually, it's none of those things. We never filed anything publicly. We simply ensured the right rumors reached the right ears." Malcolm smiled without warmth. "We've known about your mother's 3-year campaign against Brianna for 6 months. We've known about Sloane's true identity for 2 years. We were waiting for you to make your move." "You're bluffing. This is some kind of elaborate bluff." "Am I?" Malcolm nodded to Desmond. Desmond held up his phone, screen facing Richard. "As of 23 minutes ago, Underwood Global has initiated a comprehensive review of every contract with Montgomery Development Group. That represents $42 million in annual shipping revenue for your company. All of it currently frozen pending our investigation." Richard turned desperately to his aide. "Get my legal team on the phone. All of them. Now." "It gets considerably worse," Isaac said, opening his leather briefcase with deliberate slowness. "I have documentation of 17 separate wire transfers from Gloria Montgomery to Sloane Whitfield over the past 36 months. Total amount transferred, $2.3 million. Gloria rose from her seat, her composure finally cracking. "This is absolutely preposterous." "I also have recordings of your telephone conversations planning Brianna's systematic removal from this family, and detailed testimony from 6 members of your household staff regarding your private comments about your daughter-in-law's race." Isaac handed a tablet to a nearby guest, a prominent tech CEO who happened to be a major Montgomery Foundation donor. "Please feel free to verify the authenticity yourself. All metadata is intact and has been certified by independent forensic analysts." Gloria sank back into her chair. Her face had shifted from white to gray. "And you," Isaac said, turning to Sloane. "Sloane Whitfield. Birth name, Sloane Barrett. Daughter of Victor Barrett, former CEO of Barrett Logistics." Sloane's carefully constructed mask finally shattered completely. "How do you know that name?" "Your father's company collapsed after losing a major bidding war to Underwood Global in 2014. He took his own life 6 months after the bankruptcy filing." Isaac's voice softened slightly. "We're genuinely sorry for your loss. Truly. No child should lose a parent that way." "You destroyed him." Sloane's voice trembled with old rage. "You destroyed my entire family. We won a business competition, legally, ethically, by every standard that matters. Your father made choices we had no control over or responsibility for." Malcolm stepped forward. "But what you did to our sister, the systematic humiliation, the physical assault on a pregnant woman, those were your choices, and choices have consequences." Richard had been frozen through all of this, his expression cycling through fear, denial, and desperate calculation. "This is harassment," he finally managed. You can't simply land on my private property and threaten my family with baseless accusations." "Threaten?" Malcolm raised an eyebrow. "I'm not threatening anyone. I'm sharing documented information. For example, this particular piece of information." He extracted a document from Isaac's briefcase. A merger agreement between Montgomery Development Group and Underwood Global Logistics, executed in 2019. According to this contract, you were preparing to sell us your company for $800 million. Every trace of color drained from Richard's face. "But then you met our sister, and you thought, why sell the company when I can marry into something much larger?" Malcolm's voice hardened into steel. "You knew exactly who Brianna was from the very beginning. You pursued her specifically because of her connection to us. You married her to gain access to Underwood Global. Every "I love you" was a calculated business transaction. The silence was absolute. Every guest, every server, every security guard stood frozen in place. Brianna stepped forward. Her voice emerged barely above a whisper. "Richard, is that true?" He didn't answer. He didn't deny it. He simply stood there, paralyzed by the weight of his exposure. That silence told her everything she needed to know. The sound of approaching sirens shattered the frozen tableau. 3 NYPD vehicles swept up the estate's circular driveway, lights flashing against the manicured hedges. Detective Iris Coleman emerged from the lead car, flanked by 2 uniformed officers. She walked directly to Sloane Whitfield. "Ms. Whitfield, you're under arrest for assault in the 2nd degree. You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law." Sloane's remaining composure disintegrated completely. "This is insane! Richard, do something! Tell them this is all a misunderstanding!" But Richard couldn't move. His eyes remained locked on the documents Malcolm still held. The irrefutable evidence of his own betrayal, his own fraud, his own hollow marriage. The handcuffs clicked around Sloane's wrists with a sound like a period at the end of a sentence. Camera phones captured every moment from every angle. By nightfall, this footage would be viewed over 50 million times worldwide. Gloria Montgomery. Isaac's voice cut through the chaos like a surgical instrument. "You will be named as a co-defendant in civil proceedings. Charges will include conspiracy, intentional infliction of emotional distress, financial fraud, and violation of civil rights." Gloria gripped the edge of the table so hard her knuckles went white. "You cannot do this to me. Do you have any idea who I am? What my family has built?" "I know precisely who you are." Isaac's voice was colder than the Atlantic wind. "You're a woman who spent 3 years and $2.3 million trying to systematically destroy your own son's marriage because you couldn't accept a black woman in your precious family." He addressed the assembled crowd. The Wall Street Journal, the New York Times, and CNN are all running comprehensive coverage of this story in approximately 4 minutes. I would strongly suggest that anyone wishing to distance themselves from the Montgomery family begin doing so immediately. Half the guests were already fumbling for their phones. Malcolm approached Richard, his voice dropping to a volume only those nearby could hear. "You have 1 chance. Exactly 1. Richard looked up, his eyes hollow, his face a mask of defeat. "Testify against your mother. Provide complete documentation of the conspiracy. Cooperate fully with our legal team and law enforcement." "And if I agree?" "We recommend leniency to prosecutors. Your company survives, though under new oversight and compliance requirements. Your name survives, though significantly diminished." "And if I refuse?" "Underwood Global terminates every contract with Montgomery Development. Your board of directors removes you as CEO before end of business today. Your mother's assets remain frozen indefinitely. And every business journalist in America receives those 2019 merger documents proving you married our sister under completely false pretenses." Richard turned to look at his mother. Gloria's expression was stone and command. "Don't you dare." "Don't even consider it," she hissed. "After everything I've sacrificed for you." "Everything you've sacrificed for me?" Richard's voice cracked open. You've controlled every decision I've made since I was old enough to walk. You chose my schools. You chose my career path. You chose my first wife. And when I finally chose someone for myself, someone I actually loved, you spent 3 years trying to destroy her. I was protecting our family legacy. You were protecting your bigotry, your hatred, your inability to see anyone different from you as fully human. He turned back to Malcolm. I'll testify. Against my mother. Against Sloane. I'll provide everything. Gloria Montgomery released a sound that was somewhere between a scream and a sob. It was the sound of a dynasty crumbling into dust. The terrace had descended into complete chaos, guests fleeing to their cars, reporters materializing from nowhere, security guards uncertain who they were supposed to be protecting. But in the middle of the maelstrom, Brianna found a microphone. She stepped onto the small stage where Sloane had announced her triumph just 90 minutes earlier. The crowd, what remained of it, fell into uncertain silence. 6 months ago, I married a man I believed loved me. Her voice was steady, strong, the voice of a woman who had walked through fire and refused to be consumed. Yesterday, I was kicked in the stomach while carrying his child, in front of 200 people, while I begged for help. Not one of them spoke up. Not one of them intervened. Not one of them treated me like a human being worth protecting. She looked out at the faces watching her, some ashamed, some defiant, most simply stunned. Today, I'm standing here, not because my brothers saved me. They didn't save me. They gave me something more important than rescue. They reminded me who I was before I forgot. She placed her hand on her belly, where her daughter was kicking. I am Brianna Underwood. I built a literacy foundation that taught 10,000 children to read. I have delivered 862 babies safely into this world. I graduated from Harvard. I worked 18-hour shifts to help strangers. I am not a victim. I am not a charity case. I am not a diversity project or an experiment in anyone's life. Her eyes found Richard in the crowd. He couldn't meet her gaze. And to every single person who watched what happened to me and chose to say nothing, I don't need your apology. Apologies are cheap. What I need is for you to ask yourself one question. Why did I stay silent? And then I need you to make sure you never stay silent again. She paused, letting the words penetrate. Because silence in the presence of injustice is not neutrality. It's not staying out of it. It's not minding your own business. It's complicity. And complicity has a price. Brianna stepped down from the stage. The crowd parted before her as she walked toward the exit. She passed Richard. She stopped. I did love you, she said quietly, for his ears alone. That part was real, and that's the saddest part of all of this. She continued walking. She didn't look back. Outside, the chaos continued to swirl. Police cars, news vans. The grinding machinery of consequences finally catching up with the Montgomery dynasty. Detective Iris Coleman caught up with her at the edge of the property. Brianna, are you all right? Brianna considered the question seriously. Her marriage was ashes. Her husband had never truly loved her. Her mother-in-law had spent 3 years orchestrating her destruction. She had been publicly humiliated, physically assaulted, systematically erased. But her baby was healthy and kicking. Her brothers were standing behind her. And for the first time in 3 years, she could breathe without asking permission. I will be, she said. I'm going to be okay. A small commotion near the catering tent caught her attention. A little girl, maybe 6 or 7, the daughter of one of the catering staff, had broken away from her mother and was running toward Brianna. Miss Brianna! Miss Brianna! Brianna knelt down, recognizing the child from a literacy program visit months ago. Maya, sweetheart, what are you doing here? I had to tell you! The little girl was practically vibrating with excitement. I read a whole book all by myself, every single page." Brianna pulled her into a tight hug. Over the girl's shoulder, she could see Malcolm watching. Her big brother, who had once carried her on his shoulders through the streets of Newark, was smiling with tears in his eyes. "That's the best news I've heard in a very long time," Brianna said. "I'm so incredibly proud of you." Behind her, the Montgomery Empire was burning to the ground. In front of her, a child had discovered the magic of reading. She knew which one mattered more. The headlines chronicled the fall of a dynasty. Sloane Whitfield pleaded guilty to assault in the second degree. Her sentence, 18 months probation, 500 hours of community service at a domestic violence shelter, and $500,000 in restitution to Brianna. Her PR career was permanently finished. Every firm in the industry had blacklisted her name, but something unexpected emerged from the wreckage. During her community service, Sloane began actually listening to the women in the shelter. Women who had been beaten, controlled, manipulated, gaslit by partners who claimed to love them. She started recognizing patterns she had participated in, patterns she had weaponized against another woman. She wrote an essay for Medium titled "The Monster I Chose to Become." It went viral, not because anyone forgave her, but because her brutal honesty was rare in a world of carefully managed non-apologies. "I told myself I was getting justice for my father," she wrote. "But I was just becoming a different kind of abuser. Brianna Underwood never hurt my family. I hurt hers. That's something I'll carry forever." Gloria Montgomery's fall was steeper and lonelier. The society that had celebrated her for decades now treated her like a communicable disease. Every charity board removed her name from their rosters. Every social register deleted her listing. Old friends crossed the street to avoid her. She was forced to sell the Hamptons estate to cover her mounting legal fees. Then the Manhattan townhouse. Then the art collection. She ended up in a one-bedroom apartment in Jersey City. For the first time in 68 years, Gloria Montgomery had to cook her own meals, clean her own bathroom, and exist without a single servant. The woman who had looked down on Brianna's Newark upbringing now lived in a smaller space than the one where Brianna had grown up loved. Richard Montgomery testified against his mother in a deposition that lasted 11 hours. He provided every document, every email, every recorded phone call. His cooperation earned him leniency in the civil suit, but nothing could salvage his reputation or his self-respect. The board of Montgomery Development Group voted unanimously to remove him as CEO. He retained 15% ownership, enough to live comfortably, but not enough to matter. He started therapy, twice a week, every week, learning to understand how he had become a man capable of watching his pregnant wife be kicked and choosing to say nothing. He paid child support on time, every month, without complaint or negotiation. He never once asked for custody or visitation. Detective Iris Coleman received a well-deserved promotion to lieutenant. She used her new authority to establish a specialized unit investigating domestic abuse among wealthy families, crimes that too often went unpunished because money could purchase silence. She was named NYPD Officer of the Year. In her acceptance speech, she said something that made national news. "I almost chose silence once. I watched a pregnant woman get assaulted and I hesitated. I will never make that mistake again, and I will spend my career making sure others don't make it either." Hope Amara Underwood arrived on a rainy Tuesday morning in March. 7 pounds, 2 ounces. Healthy lungs that announced her presence to the entire maternity ward. Perfect in every way. All 3 of Brianna's brothers were in the waiting room. Malcolm cried openly, which he would deny until his dying day. Desmond bought every stuffed animal the hospital gift shop had in stock. Isaac had already established a trust fund that would guarantee Hope the finest education money could provide. But Brianna didn't want her daughter raised with only privilege. She wanted her raised with purpose. 6 months after Hope's birth, the Hope Amara Women's Health Center opened its doors in Newark. the same neighborhood where Brianna had grown up shivering in winters with no heat but never lacking for love. The clinic provided free health care to women who couldn't afford it, prenatal care for mothers with nowhere else to turn, mental health services for survivors of abuse, job training for women rebuilding their lives. Underwood Global funded the construction, but Brianna ran everything herself. She was there every single day, holding babies, counseling frightened mothers, building something that would outlast any scandal or headline. She was invited to address the United Nations on domestic violence in wealthy families. 23 million people watched her speech. Money doesn't protect you from abuse, she told the Global Assembly. It just makes the abuse look more expensive. It doesn't protect you from racism. It just makes the racism more polite. And it definitely doesn't protect you from people who see you as less than human. The only thing that protects you is people who refuse to stay silent, people who see injustice and speak up anyway. 1 year after the victory brunch that destroyed his family, Richard Montgomery wrote a letter to Brianna. It wasn't an apology. He knew better than to think words alone could repair what he had shattered. It was a simple request, written on plain paper with trembling handwriting. He wanted to meet his daughter, just once, just to see her face. Brianna read the letter 3 times. She didn't respond. 3 months later, she sent a photograph. Hope, laughing in the sunshine, her eyes, Richard's eyes, bright with pure joy. On the back, in Brianna's careful handwriting, "She has your eyes. Prove you deserve to see them in person." Richard understood the message. He started volunteering at a domestic violence shelter, the same one where Sloane completed her community service. 3 days a week, every week. He wasn't trying to earn forgiveness. He was trying to become someone who didn't need to ask for it. He wasn't there yet. He might never fully arrive. But for the first time in his privileged, protected, carefully managed life, Richard Montgomery was genuinely trying to become a decent human being. The sign outside the clinic reads, "Hope Amara Women's Health Center, because silence is never safety." Brianna stands before it, her daughter balanced on her hip, the morning sun warm on both their faces. Behind her, 3 men who collectively control a $12 billion empire are arguing passionately about whose turn it is to hold the baby next. "You didn't actually need us, you know," Malcolm says quietly. Brianna smiles and shakes her head gently. "No, but I'm so glad you came anyway." She looks at the building, at the women walking through its doors toward help and hope, at the future being constructed one saved life at a time. "I didn't need to be rescued," she says softly. "I needed to be seen. My brothers didn't save me. They reminded the world I was never invisible." If you've ever been silenced, this story is for you. If you've ever witnessed someone else being silenced, this story is for you. Share it, subscribe, and answer honestly. What would you have done?